Welcome to the Epik Mellon podcast, conversations with the real humans behind broadband networks, cybersecurity, and the future of communications. Brought to you by QA Cafe. In this episode, I got to talk with Elizabeth Parks from Parks Associates, the premier research firm for the connected consumer industry, about the pace of technology over the last 40 years and how everyone, everywhere in the supply chain, needs to have their mind on the consumer experience. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Epik Mellon podcast, conversations with the real humans behind broadband networks and cybersecurity, because we are actually real people, not just sitting behind LinkedIn and writing reports all the time. I am here with Elizabeth Parks from Parks Associates, and I'm really excited to talk to her because I love everything that she does in the industry. And it's even, even when I don't get to read the deep level research stuff, like the amount of insights that you guys provide is just, it's amazing. And I love that it satisfies my confirmation bias in a lot of cases, right? I'm so glad that data was exactly what I expected it to be.
Well, thank you for the invitation to join you this morning.
You're welcome. You're welcome. As the Epik Mellon podcast is entirely funded by QA Cafe, the views expressed by myself or Elizabeth on this podcast do not reflect those of QA Cafe or its ownership, and I expect that the same goes for you, even though your last name is on the is on the brand. I still imagine that your opinions are your own.
Yes, true.
And since we are entirely funded by QA Cafe, we do have 3 products we make here for the networking and cybersecurity industries. Soon to be some more in a couple weeks that I'll talk about next time. The first is CD Router, which is the industry standard test platform for broadband gateways, Wi-Fi routers, and other customer premises equipment, or CPE. CD Router contains thousands of fully automated test cases designed by network experts, many of whom are sitting right up there, covering feature validation, stability, certification, and performance all in one. Moreover, QA Cafe's world-class support team acts as an extension of your own, helping you understand the technologies and build better products overall, which I feel is really important. We get more questions about the technologies themselves than people asking questions about CD. So we have to fill 2 roles. It's very strange. Our second product is CloudShark, which is the way to make network packet captures an easy and useful part of your cybersecurity workflow. CloudShark helps you work on tough issues together without passing around large trace files, losing data, or risking security leaks of valuable information, and helps entry-level analysts learn from your senior experts, curate best practices, and standardize operating procedures around packet captures. Lastly, QA Cafe's Passport is a fully automated test solution for testing the connectivity and interoperability of IoT and smart home devices. Testing with Passport is as simple as connecting your device, selecting tests, and getting clear pass-fail results with full log data and packet captures to find and resolve bugs before they end up as a bad review of your product on Amazon.com. To find out more about CD Router, CloudShark, and Passport, you can find us at www.qacafe.com. I'm just getting over a cold, so I feel like my radio voice is even deeper than usual. You know how you have that sort of special voice that only happens when you
You're rocking it today, right?
Right, I should be sick all the time. Well, welcome. I'm so glad you're here. I've been looking forward to this for a while, so but I want to start by sort of hearing your story, right? So I've known you and Parks Associates and everything that you guys do for a very long time. But I was talking to this legal firm called Marashlian and Donahue. I was speaking to a woman named Diana from them, and one of the things that they chose to do was sort of find this niche in telecom, networking, right, broadband, now consumer electronics and AI and a bunch of other stuff. But they decided as a law firm to be very focused, and so I feel like that's how you guys got your start and have been doing it for so long. And I've always been curious about how that started and why. Why, where did that come from?
Yeah, so again, thanks, Jason, for the invitation to join you. So, Parks Associates was started back in the late 80s by my mom, Trisha Parks, who she's still around and she's semi-active, I'd say, in the business. She's stepped a little bit into her retirement zone, but still is the chairman of the company. And I interact with her all the time about the business. So, she moved from New York and New Jersey down to Texas and ended up working for a company called Future Computing. And that company was run by a woman named Portia Isaacson, and Portia was very focused on technology and the role of technology on everyday lives. And my mom ended up being the VP of research at that business. And
Cool.
so
Okay.
that was in the early 80s, probably 84, 85. And really, it was tracking the impact of computing on our homes and what was
Right.
technology going to do. So the personal computer was introduced in 84, and IBM said we're going to have a PC in every household. So the Future Computing, the company ended up getting bought out by McGraw-Hill, which is a publishing
Right.
company out of New York. And my mom did not want to move back to New York, New Jersey. And so she stopped working there due to that acquisition, and then worked for another company called IntelliHome that was actually helping with the setup of some of these advanced systems in homes. And
Oh,
then
interesting.
yeah, and then she founded Parks Associates shortly after. So there's actually this really great photo of her from USA Today in 1986, where the headline is "Computerizing All the Comforts of Home," and she's talking about voice controls and computer touch screens and the role of the home network, integrated devices and systems, and
And that
then
was 30 years ago.
yeah. Yeah. So she was really ahead of her time in the sense of being able to have a vision for the whole home connected experience. And really just, we worked I mean, it was just my mom. And at the start, it was just her working out of our house. Her first clients were like AT&T and T and IBM, and then she worked for the utilities in Texas and understanding the deregulated energy market. So everything that she's always worked on was all about the power of choice of the consumer, and how does the consumer make a decision about their whatever they're buying in their home. And so it could be their electricity service and what would sway them to pick this program or service over
Right.
another, given that choice was then becoming an option for consumers as the markets got deregulated. So,
Right.
she was really is an amazing person and is very well respected in the ideas that she had back then with the power of the network, data, the wiring and the integration of the systems and devices. And that's been the foundation of all of our work, has come
Yeah.
from that thinking from back in the beginning.
That's crazy because so much of that has come true. Man, so I feel I should have just taken a bunch of notes because I have a laundry list of like pins from that conversation. Because like I'll skip to the end, right? Like uh the thing that keeps coming up, at least from a networking perspective, right? From the stuff that I deal with on a daily basis, is that there is this weird sort of um, horseshoe theory kind of a thing where like the internet started as a consumer product, right? I've talked about this on a couple of past shows where it's like our original experience of connecting to the internet before it was even the internet, right? Was not to go through a telco, right? Was not to go through our cable company. It was to make a phone call. They just facilitated it and had nothing to do with it beyond that, right? Um, and I brought that point up before to talk about how rough it is for operators now, right? But in reality, the point behind that story is that those things that you guys work on and that your mom worked on are exactly what you said. They were all consumer products first, which is very different from other networking, right? It's like the rest of the networking world when it comes to, how enterprises deal with networking campuses and data centers and all that stuff, and how their security works and how dealing with large numbers of people and stuff like that. Totally different. For us in broadband and subscriber home networks, right? The consumers are the ones who have had the controls the entire time, and they have always experienced it that way. And so it's created a weird world for everything else now that everything is connected home, right? Because
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think that, my mom recognized the power of the consumer in the way the future is going to unfold. It's because the consumer is going to go out and buy those products. And so whether you're selling directly to the consumer or you're a B2B to B to C down the line player, having an understanding of the consumer perception of technology and the buyer journey, as well as the reality, right? The reality of markets growing and how they grow, the speed and pace of different verticals and the technologies attached to them becomes really important to define. And so she was really dead set on, and we have, this is very important to our business, and just understanding how to categorize products, how to be consistent with data, a data set, which is consumer research. We survey 8 or 10,000 internet households every quarter. And so we have this really very incredibly valuable historical data set that's not just a decade. We can actually go back,
right,
38 years. We can go back to before there was broadband. Like, we started tracking broadband adoption when it was introduced in the market. We worked with the home builders and understanding the impact of structured wiring and coax cable and Cat5 and
really,
Cat6e and all this stuff. So even broadband numbers, we Parks Associates has its own forecast of broadband users. Now we look at the census data and what the government puts out as far as households and things like that, but we have our own metrics of tracking broadband, and that is the
right,
foundation of everything else we forecast, right? How can you forecast smart TVs if you don't know how many internet households there are or they're going to be in the future? And so being
right,
able to have a base of knowledge that then we, like, now it's not just internet, it's fixed wireless, you're looking at mobile, you've got the 5G, there's splitting of industries because of advancements in technology.
right,
If you
right,
look at home security, it's not just a security system anymore. You have to look at the fact that you can get a single networked camera and pay for professional monitoring. So be able to accurately and reliably track markets across time is something that I'd say we're specialists at. And
right,
in the consumer space, that's wholeheartedly where our focus is. We look at
right,
small to medium businesses as well and the market there, but that's because the consumer products play there. And we look at multifamily, which is apartments and condos, because consumers live there. And so then we also have this incredible view of the building environment and that
right.
infrastructure from like the telecom and broadband side, which is really interesting right now because there's a lot of activity going on with bulk internet services or not being allowed to do that with the
Right, right.
FCC. So I really love the work that we do and the way we look at the markets and the way we can understand the opportunities between the overlapping ecosystems is
Yeah,
really
yeah, exactly. And I really like that you put it that way, where it's like in this space, no matter where you are in the supply chain, it is the end user that you are. It's the end user that you're building for, right? Like at the end of the day, like that's what's really going on, right? You see it with IoT, big time, right? Because you have this whole clash of a world that was consumer electronics of selling pieces of plastic that had electronics in them and not worrying about them after your 1 year warranty or whatever, right? to things that are now connected to the internet all the time can be super insecure and difficult to interoperate. And I think, I don't, I'm not gonna ask you all the time for results from your research because I realize that that's a thing. But for the stuff that you've posted publicly, one of the things that I found very sobering and one of my low confirmation biases was the whole how slow the uptake on smart home is, right? Because it's effectively this big DIY project at Home Depot right now, right? you know, and like we talk about elsewhere that the operators have an opportunity to sort of take ownership and help out with that, but still, it is being experienced from the consumer mind. Do I need this? Is it worth the hassle? There's all this stuff I've heard about it that's super scary that I don't know if I want to commit to, right? It's crazy, and so everybody
Yeah.
has to think about it that way. And we get disconnected from it, you know.
Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, we would characterize the smart home space as slow and steady, and that's how it will remain. It's
Has there been any technologies that have not been slow and steady?
yeah. Well, I mean, you can look at the smart speaker, right? Smart speakers were
Yeah,
introduced, and within 5 years, they reach over half of U.S. households. That's fast.
that's
But
fast.
it's also a speaker at its heart. We
Yeah,
don't even put that device in the smart home category. We put it in the consumer electronics category because it is a speaker
right,
with a software agent in it that is then an integrated point, like, it can be used as a voice controller.
right.
But so that's quick. But I mean, if you look at and I love our we have one chart that shows across time for like 30 years of like the TV and the computer and the laptop, the smartphone. I mean, all of these things take decades of time to unfold and get adopted. What's interesting about the household is you've got the people in the household. So you have devices that are for a person versus the device for the house. And so that's one important thing also I think about our data is that we look at household data. We do count some things like we have numbers for how many people have a smartphone and it would be people, right? Because
Yeah,
if I have three kids and a husband, maybe we have five phones in our house.
right, right,
But if you have a smart door lock, the house has the door lock and five people live here. Right.
right,
So
right, right,
looking at data in a way that makes sense, like a security system goes with the house, not with
right,
individual, and counting it that way is also important. So
right.
vulnerabilities and security threats are like the top is the number three barrier to adopting any of these products, right? The first one is cost, the second is the value proposition, and the third is I'm afraid of it being hacked and or you're spying on me type of thinking.
Right, 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 right.
And
Which is really two separate problems, but from the
yes,
consumer perspective, it's the
yes.
same thing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they did just
Huh.
come out with a cyber security mark on the smart home devices. The US government just came out with that, and it's backed also. CSA was helping with introducing that, and that's going to
Oh,
be,
cool. And that was NIST, right?
yes, I believe so. And it's kind of like Energy Star mark, so that
Right.
if you were going to Best Buy or whatever, or Amazon online, and you saw this mark, you would associate that it's gone through some kind of certification to say that it's a more protected device than not. And so that will be
That's
interesting to
really
see
cool.
if that ends up having an impact. I mean, I just had a conversation the other day with the LA Times about this, and oh, do we need to put the fear in people about privacy and data security? I'm like, well, not fear, but I mean, I have kids, and I tell them all the time to be really careful of what they click, who they're interacting with, if there's anybody talking to them, um, and I'm not trying to make them scared, but I do think there has to be an awareness because and then the industry has to act. It's upon the industry to help solve these security issues, whether you're a service provider or you're making the router or you're making the device. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
everybody needs to be in on the cyber protections.
Especially that it's getting smarter, right? Like and not even just using AI to do it, but like the types of phishing techniques that I see now, just that come to me personally, are like, wow, if I was anyone else, I would have clicked on that right now.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I even question some of the stuff I get. I'm like, is this real? Probably send 3 emails a day to our IT team. Like, is this a real thing I'm supposed to open?
Yeah,
Because sometimes it comes from our clients'
right.
emails where I'm like, is this real? So,
Oh yeah.
um, I think more and more has to be done. And really that it's surprising that our national government hasn't come up with some kind of national standard. I mean, GDPR in Europe
Well, for all its goods and bads, right?
yeah, I mean there's some restrictions there that maybe some companies aren't happy with, but the idea of a standard across the board, standards help the industry and the consumer space usually. Standards usually
Right.
help
Right.
if you can figure it out.
Well, that's good. That's good to hear. At least my half of my life isn't useless. I mean, it's funny though because it's standards is always a situation of you can lead a horse to water, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's a challenge, but
Yeah.
I do think that it ends up being a challenge that it just has to be. I mean, it just really has to be dealt with. I don't think there could be enough attention paid to security right now.
Yeah, yeah. And it's really tough because you have the international standard, but it's also a lot of it is really hard and expensive. And so you have companies out there that are making products that have extremely low margins, right? And
Yes.
then all of a sudden you're like, oh, this is connected to the internet. You need an entire security suite and TLS and all these things on top of it to make sure that every single communication you have is, and you have to go through all these certifications to make, and all of a sudden it's like, okay, well, that's not really worth it anymore.
Yeah, and that's I think that'll show up more and more. It's this hardware as a service idea that's been out and around and really coming into play, which is you're taking a piece of hardware that like you said, used to just be able to sell that and it's sold and you keep going. Now you have to support it. You have to provide updates. You have to make sure it doesn't get hacked. You have to inform the end user about all of that. It becomes a cost just to have the product being built, which means you have to have, I mean, you've got to have a service attachment to that, which means you have to charge for it. And that's
Yeah,
where I think it's getting a little tricky for everybody to figure out, okay, where's the money? How do we pay for all of this that's required with this new type of device? I mean, it's all over the place with the smart home device market and moving towards some kind of monthly fee, even if it's
right.
small, uh, to be able to support that. And then a lot of stuff gets bricked. A lot of these devices might get bricked in a few years, or they stop support altogether. So there's a lot of challenges still, I think, that have to get worked out. And while you said everybody's going out and like maybe building their own smart home, there is a lot of that going on. We still do see the professional installer becoming a more important piece of all
Well,
this because
and
of
they're
the
mostly independent right now. Like, is it sort of just, or is it associated with a retail store rather than, right? Because the the story I'm getting to is, operators taking ownership of this and making it part of their brand. They come in and do the smart home for you, which is nice because they also have control of the network, so they can also maintain this cybersecurity and make sure the firmware is up to date and do all this stuff,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, and I mean, I think for any of the service providers, the smart home is a great opportunity. And it makes a lot of sense. And then that service provider owns the home. I mean,
Yeah.
they already own the home with the connectivity, and so now they're just
Right.
extending it and creating more value, which is stickiness. And but the challenge, I think, is scale.
Yeah.
The service providers, the big ones, and the smaller ones, they need to be able to scale a lot. And so if they can't get to those numbers, then somehow it doesn't work out, so
Yeah.
but we root for the broadband providers to come in with managed networks and with whole home experiences, and with bridging the entertainment side of the house with the security and controls and comfort, and that is what we're all moving towards. Now they even have some houses that just get built like that. I mean, the whole
Oh,
community,
cool.
it's like the
Right,
community
right,
is a
right.
smart home, and you even have community energy, and you got all these, I don't know, green things going on. You have automation, you've got the security, you've got, I know a woman I work with, she just bought a house that's new, and it came with all these smart home things, and it was a brand new built home. So she's like, oh, I've got
Yeah.
the Nest thermostat, and I've got so the home builders are definitely catching on to adding the tech into the home to start, but you've got the retrofit side, which is the, build your own smart home, where people
Right,
just go out
right.
and I'll buy this device, and oh, maybe I'll get a Ring doorbell, and maybe I'll get a networked camera, or I just had a baby. Things
Yeah,
happen. People have life changes, and then they buy things.
yeah,
So
yeah. It's funny. It's like even here, right? Engineers and in general, and anyone developing any project or any creative task, really, greenfield is way more refreshing
right,
than trying to
yeah,
work through the stuff you already have.
yeah. We're seeing that a lot in multifamily, in the sense that, of course, the new builds, building a new building and from the ground up and putting all the fancy wiring and connected everything in there is
Fiber to the room.
yeah, but the retrofit is a real headache. I mean, because you've got really antiquated systems and wiring, and who owns the wires even. It gets pretty
Right,
complicated
right.
on the
Yeah.
MDU side, but
Well,
that's
it's funny because you say like the service provider owns the home, but I don't know that like that's where that collision has happened, right? Because like the consumer networking products, especially Wi-Fi, have always been over here in the land of Best Buy, right? And it's been the people who go out and buy those things and set those things up. And for the longest time, and even now, people are super resistant to having the service provider give you your home router, right?
hmm
And they're like, no, I want to be able to buy my own and not rent this thing every month. And I'm like, wait, you don't understand maybe the things that you're missing out by doing that.
yeah.
But that's the clash right there, right? And so it's like that it's different everywhere around the world, obviously, right? But who does own those wires? Who is able to step in? At what point is there not a competition between the hyperscalers and the service providers on who's controlling that smart home stuff and who gets paid in the end, right? It's tough. It's super tough.
Yep, there's definitely a business model conundrum there, and then you get the tech giants and the platform play in the middle of all that, and it becomes even more complicated. Um, Certainly, Google, Amazon, Apple, Samsung, they are the majority platform provider for the most part for the consumer, and so you know that adds another really big group of players to mix and mingle with. And of course everybody's scared of those groups because they think, oh well, Amazon's going to take over my whole business. But um, ultimately I think the tech giants understand the role of all the different ecosystem players, and they really can't fulfill everybody, um,
Right.
certainly not at this point, but they can play a huge great enabler along with the service providers and connectivity. So I
Right.
think, if anything, they should just be watching like the broadband side is when Amazon's starts offering broadband, and
Oh yeah, that's a
that's
really good point, right?
then that's when if I was the service provider, I might
Yeah,
get a little nervous.
right. And Google obviously did,
Yeah,
but like most Google projects, you know, but
yeah. But
I don't.
Google, that could, like, It could come into play interestingly with like utilities and energy stuff. There's Google and Amazon are really amazing companies in all that they're doing, and so it's always interesting to look at some of their activities and then wonder like where are they going with that, you know? So
Yeah, yeah. No, it's true. I mean, yeah, Amazon has already talked about doing stuff like that. At
mhm.
least even from just getting into the managed network side of things and offering that service, even it so the operator really is just sort of there and letting Amazon handle everything else.
Mhm.
How do consumers feel about it though? Like I've seen varying information about who trusts who more.
Yeah, there is a lack of trust that goes along with the tech giants. From our research and what we're tracking, the home security providers and the insurance providers are the top of the list. And so we,
It's cool.
yeah, we track NPS scores for service providers individually, and then we can roll them up and get a category view. And so we have NPS for broadband, home security, insurance, streaming services,
Right.
and
For,
then
for those who don't know what NPS is, it's a net promoter score. It's a metric it's an overall metric for deciding how well customers like you.
yes, exactly. And if they would, be willing to refer your product or service. And so
Right.
it's a metric that we track and we look at. And NPS, there's different studies, not ours, but different studies out there that would potentially tie higher NPS to higher revenue overall for a business. And so it's a metric that everybody is watching and looking at. And as far as experience goes, trust, of course, with any relationship is at the top of the list. I think whether it's business and you're paying, or you're a consumer, paying home insurance, or you're buying a car or buying anything, or it's your husband or wife. I mean, you're putting your trust. And home security is all about protecting your family and safety. And so that makes sense that they'd be one of the most trusted providers. You're paying somebody to show up if something's gone wrong and save your family. And then insurance, same thing, right? You trust when something goes wrong that they're going to take care of it, and you pay them for that.
Isn't that interesting? I just thought of this just now that isn't it interesting that consumers as human beings have already had the instinct for that long-term relationship with any provider of anything that they buy, you know, when 30 years ago in the past, the industry wasn't that way, but maybe the instinct was still there, right? And that's why maybe there was a big disconnect, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting to think about how people have changed their relationship with somebody, a business selling them something, certainly. And now there's so much more to it. I mean, gosh, because I mean, I heard the other day Roku had a security breach of 15,000 accounts that it owns. Well, I have like three Rokus, I think, so
Right.
and so does my mom, and so does my dad, and a lot of people I know have a Roku, and we cover the streaming media device, so it's part of what our work does. But it did make me think, oh wow, like what's going on there? So the the protections become part of that trusted relationship. So do the
Right.
partnerships. If you're so and so partnering with so and so, you better make sure everybody wants to make sure your partner is legit, and anything they're doing could impact your business now because of the
Right. Right.
partnership.
Right. Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
so it seems like there's a lot more complications in terms of brand loyalty and trust. But those are things that we're tracking overall in our research. And the tech giants don't, you'd be surprised that people do trust the tech giants in a lot of different ways, and that they have an understanding that there's like some kind of natural exchange of data. Like, I don't know if that's
Right. Right.
because people got on Facebook and so they know,
Well, no, I
you
really
know,
think that it's about managing expectations, right?
yeah.
It's like people can joke that it's ironic that consumers trust the people who actually have the use of their data in their business model, right? But I don't think it's ironic at all because they were totally upfront about it. Nobody's. There's no secret there, right? Everybody knows, right? You
Yeah,
know that when you enter this relationship, that's part of what's happening, and it's part of the value for you, right? Because of all the stuff they can do because they're using that information,
sure.
right?
Yeah.
And so it's like if you don't trust it, don't use it. And everybody's been sort of upfront about it. So everybody starting to use one of those services knows what they're getting into. You know,
Well, and that's I mean, almost everything is that way now, right? You go anywhere and they want to get an app and then they want to track what you're buying and then or you say you want to go to Arkansas and all of a sudden you got houses on the in Arkansas popping up on your Google. It's like,
yeah,
okay, who's listening? But um I mean, data that's what everybody seems to be after, to better understand their buyer in the end.
right, right. Which is good. I don't want it's it's definitely better from an efficiency perspective, right? We always, excuse me, I the example I give is retail clothing, right? It's like I would love to finally get to a point where something like clothing is just in time produced, right? Where it's
Yeah.
like I know exactly what I need. It's cheap enough for me to order exactly the fit that I need at the time it arrives at the place, right? And I don't think people understand that like getting that huge amount of data and making these little refinements to have things be targeted towards you gets us closer to stuff like that,
Mhm.
We already have it for many, many different products, right? And a lot of times the places we don't have it are because somebody's standing in the way, like you know, uh, car dealerships, right? Where it's like you still can't buy a car on the internet. You have to go through a dealership in some states.
Well, and even so, like if you think about just the business model of cars in general, like I know one of my sisters lived in DC for a few years, and she was in the city, and she didn't want to have her car. And so I was like, "Well, how do you get to the grocery store?" And she's like, "Oh, I just go get in this car on the street, and I rent it for an hour, and I just get in it,
Yeah,
and I drive off to the grocery store. I get my groceries, and I park it, and that's it." And so there's all these different things that are coming up with how to we've got the ability to give the consumer that choice, and so why not enable it? People in the city don't want to own a car because they have to pay for parking and they don't actually drive anywhere usually, but they need a car twice a month or whatever. So let's let them rent a car
yeah,
and do it
yeah.
on a use
Hmm.
scenario. So I mean, technology just is enabling so much choice, and that's creating a lot of fragmentation because you got things disaggregating all over the place. And then
Right,
the
right,
choices
right.
opening up, which in some ways can be good for the consumer, and in some ways can be more confusing and harder to navigate. Like where do I watch a TV show? Who knows?
Yeah,
I don't watch TV, so that I don't have that problem. But you know that streaming is a great example of like, wow, what look at all the changes that have happened in entertainment, and meanwhile these companies are flailing about trying to figure out how do we make money now. We've
right,
disaggregated everything and gone direct, and now we have no contracts, and where's the money in 3 years going to come from?
right,
They used to have a model that they could forecast that, and now they don't, and so
right, right.
now they've
Oh, that is totally messed up. I never really thought about that before. It really is that when you had broadcast and you had all the useless channels you don't want, the broadcasters still making money off of those things, and that's how they can afford to give you the stuff they do want that you do want. And now that's totally removed.
there's an incredible amount of changes in the different models, and like the content rights and the distribution of pennies that adds up to a lot of money,
Yeah,
and the advertising, it's everything is turned upside down right now, and that's impacting the broadband providers because they have
yeah,
that entertainment revenue. And so that's the bundle is moving, the quad play, triple play, all the whole bundles of the past are gone. And now we've got these whole new sets of bundles, which are
right,
also going to
right,
be mobile and fixed,
yeah,
and Wi-Fi management too on top of it. So
right, right,
it's interesting, but I think a challenging market to navigate, especially coming off COVID. A lot of
right.
companies are still trying to figure out the past and the moving forward future.
Right, right. And a lot of it, I feel like, is a pendulum too, right? So you have the people who are like, I just want to buy the channels I want. And now it's like, why do I have to pay a little bit for everything? And then
Yeah. And
and then
where
it goes
do
back
I
to the
find it?
bundles.
Yeah, and I think
Yeah.
the sports thing, I don't know if you're a sports guy, but the sports stuff is really interesting. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see how these things unfold. And you're going to tap into a segment perhaps that isn't a natural internet. It's not the young, the older guys and women, but a lot of older guys, they want to watch their sports and they're going to pay for it wherever it's at. And so how does the traditional sports rights groups move to this new model and bring their fans with them?
No, it's totally hard because I think about it all the time, right? Like, I know personally that Paramount Plus is CBS, but I don't think the average person knows that. So if they're used to watching the New England Patriots on CBS, there's a level, and
Yeah.
as you know, every time you create a layer of indirection, the chance that somebody's going to be like, forget it, like
Yeah.
increases exponentially,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Exactly. Well, and then all the brand changing, like HBO changing its name to Go or
To
whatever, to
Max,
Max,
yeah,
is like,
like why?
why? Yeah, I mean, exactly. Uh,
I've I've been reading a lot of April Dunford lately, the product positioning
mhm.
guru there, and that's one of the things she's always talking about. She's like, "Why are you rebranding? Why?"
Yeah. Rebranding I would say should almost never be done, really.
No, it's nice. It feels nice, right? Maybe it's a little cathartic, but it's
Yeah.
a lot of work.
Yeah. Well, especially if you do it like 5 times every 6 months, it's really gonna
Oh yeah,
confuse whoever's your loyalty, customer is no longer gonna get it. So,
right, 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 right,
yeah.
right. Yeah,
So
that's crazy. There was one other thing that I was thinking about that I was going to ask. So the entertainment and broadband together, smashing together kind of thing, while at the same time that they're either losing broadcast TV or they never were into it in the first place, and then they kind of took ownership of it. They were a telco, they weren't a cable company, and they started doing IPTV, and then now it's kind of dropping off. And like, um, the I remember the thing that you posted about the smart TV still being the most important center of everything, right?
mhm.
And we've been talking a lot about just through the technology that we've been enabling at Broadband Forum, um, about the smart gateway becoming this more, obviously becoming application enabled and doing all kinds of other cool stuff, right? So cybersecurity is running on it, maybe Matter controllers are running on it, but eventually also combining all the entertainment stuff into one thing. Like, what is the new name for this thing such that consumers can identify with it more than a Wi-Fi router? Which a Wi-Fi router you're supposed to stick in the corner. Please don't stick it in the corner, ladies and gentlemen. That's the worst place it could possibly be. And I know that you do it, right? Because they're ugly and you want to forget about it. But like, what is this new thing? What do we call this new thing such that there actually can be this thing that is handling everything for everyone and making it so that the smart TV is just the TV, right? It's not this like all critical thing. It's like this is the critical thing because it's doing everything and you know what it is.
Yeah, I think the TV will continue. One of the things about the TV is that it's still the TV. I mean, if you look at it, even it's changed the form factor, but it does look like a television still. And I think what'll happen is just the functionality of the TV has changed and created this whole new way to interact with the television that provides a lot of value to some people, whether that's telling an older person they need to get up and move around for 5
Yeah,
minutes because they
yeah,
haven't gotten up in 2 hours, and it can view that, and maybe the older
right.
person doesn't remember because maybe they're older, and maybe has some form of dementia. Maybe it's that the TV shows the security camera at the door and tells you that there's somebody there. Maybe it's the voice to turn the lights off. So I think the TV now has the platform in it, and that's what everybody's after. That's why
Yeah.
Walmart is spending billions of dollars on Vizio. I mean, Vizio is the third largest TV manufacturer in the US. And the reason Walmart's buying Vizio isn't for the hardware, right? It's for the platform. That's the advertising. That's the future revenue streams that's
Right.
coming off of the hardware. And that's actually it a good, very good example of hardware as a service, where it's taking hardware as the TV service as we know it, traditional broadcast TV. Now we're plugging in streaming as the possibility. Everybody's moving to that. And then we're going to add so much more. And that is all built off the platform. It could be interaction. It could be betting on your favorite sports game. It could be you're watching a show with your sister and you chat with her on it because she lives across the country, and I don't know, you're trying to stay in touch with her, and that's a way you guys do that.
Right.
I mean, the television will just become, I mean, you could take your phone and you can cast to the TV. My dad was
Right.
in town. My dad did that the other day and was so impressed with himself that he was able to get the
It's really handy.
I mean, he got the tennis channel. He really wanted to watch the tennis that I don't have because I don't pay for that channel, and cast it. And he's like, look, and he did that, and he's 70 something. So
It's awesome.
I mean, there's just so much more value. And right now, our data shows 66% of households have a smart television. A lot of the televisions being purchased in the last 12 months are smart TVs. We also see the continued, adoption of streaming media players also, but televisions, come
Right.
in buying cycles. And so, people upgrade their TVs it's actually a lot shorter time period for a upgrade than it used to be for a
Oh yeah.
television. I think it's every 5 years. So we'll
I
just,
we had to do it because it started dying for
yeah.
no reason.
Yeah, well, and that also, with any electronics these days, the replacement cycles will probably be shorter because,
There's more moving parts, and
yeah,
people think it's like planned obsolescence, but no, they're just very
yeah,
complicated
right.
devices.
They have a lot going on. They have a lot going
Yeah.
on. So,
No, it got me thinking though, to bring this full circle to the start of our conversation around smart speakers. It's like it's interesting to notice that the fundamental thing about the smart TV and how people interact with it is because it is their visual interface, right? And the fundamental thing about smart speakers is that it is their auditory, it's their sound interface, right? And their voice interface,
hmm
right? And so it all comes back to exactly how human beings expect to interact with their world, right? And making sure that we're always matching up with their expectations about how that's going to work. I'm sure you've heard the anecdote about how uh, there were some smart lighting people who um, realized that they should include a control panel that you put on the wall anyway, because nobody picks up their phone, unlocks their phone, opens the app to turn the lights on and off.
yeah,
Everyone is used to getting up and hitting that thing, right?
hmm
So until you have some other method of convenience that can break that cycle entirely, people are still going to do it.
yeah, right. And they're like, make sure you give me a light switch, please.
Yeah,
So.
yeah.
But it
It's
isn't,
like,
I mean, the idea of technology becoming invisible is something that we talk about a lot, right? I mean,
oh yeah,
is there going to be a need for a thermostat in the future? The actual hardware on the
oh that's a good
wall?
point.
Maybe not,
Yeah,
right? Because you have all the sensors everywhere, and you don't need that. So, but everything takes time, and it is all an evolution, and that's why we love tracking the market at Parks. So
yeah.
that's
I'm
part,
glad you love doing it.
yeah,
I love that you love doing
yeah.
it.
It's really fun. It really is.
Yeah, cool. Well, thank you very much. And as always, I always want to continue our conversations whenever something weird pops in my brain. I always write to Elizabeth and be like, "Hey, by the way, have you guys ever done any research on this?"
Yes, and I'm always happy to try to help if I can.
Cool. All right. So, thank you very much. And if there's anything you want me to throw up on YouTube when I post this in the links area, I can definitely do that. And if in the future you want to hop back on the show, you're always welcome. Obviously, if we have some cool new stuff you want to talk about.
Yes,
Uh,
that's great. Well, I appreciate the invite, and
yeah.
I'll think if there's any links that might be useful, and otherwise let me know, and
Yeah,
Thanks for thinking about me to support your podcast.
indeed. And speaking of supporting this podcast, please do subscribe. It makes everything easier for everyone and lets me
Yes.
know that I have more than just my dad listening.
Yes.
Right.
I will do that for sure.
Um, and so everybody out there, you can subscribe on YouTube, subscribe on Apple Podcasts, or any of your favorite podcast platforms. That makes everything easier for everybody. And above all, own the nerdy things that you love and have fun doing them. Thanks, Liz.